So welcome to this week's episode of Leaders on a Mission, where I'm joined by inspiring leaders driven by the impact of creating a healthy and sustainable world. Now, in today's episode, I'm joined by Stian Rognlid, CEO of Aquaticode. Now, a very innovative ag-tech business combining artificial intelligence and aquaculture and providing solutions for the aquaculture market. So I'm really delighted Stian's joined us today on the show. So Stian, thanks for your time and super excited to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you. Very happy for the invite.
Excellent. So look, let's take it all the way back. I mean, AI, we're talking about now AI and aquaculture, but I suppose as you were thinking about your upbringing and thinking about, say, I suppose some of the key forces that helped shape the main influences when you consider where you are now.
Sure. I grew up in the northernmost town in the world. It's a place called Hammerfest. It's also a place where, you know, the winter nights are never ending and the summer nights are right to stay, basically. It can get extremely cold and the wind is unforgiving and nothing actually grows there apart from heather and moss. But it's also, I think, a place of pristine nature, endless, landscapes, great beauty. And I spent a fair, part of my childhood outdoors, skiing or hiking or playing football or riding a bicycle or whatever. But I don't think I actually fully appreciated how connected you are with the elements in northern Norway. But now, though, when I go back and visit, because I don't live there anymore, I live in the southwest at the moment. I feel very actually fortunate to have grown up on the shores of the Barents Sea. I come from a lineage of fishermen, and I think, like many Norwegians, I feel drawn to the ocean. So actually, looking back at where I came from, I can't say I'm too surprised that I ended up in aquaculture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I can understand that for sure. And what about like career-wise? I suppose when you were, if we were going back 10 years, for instance, on the journey, just kind of run us through a little bit around, your career and where you started and how your career progressed.
Yeah, so my last position to start in that end was with a company called Nutreco/Skretting, which is the largest aquafeed producer in the world, and I had several positions within the company. I spent some years in Brazil, and then I spent some years in Ireland before I joined the head office here in Stavanger, where I led Skretting's global RAS efforts. And RAS is a production system that allows farming of salmon and other species in contained facilities. So basically allowing you to farm aquatic species anywhere as long as you have good access to land and water and energy. And I found that extremely interesting because, these guys are pioneers. The RAS technology, especially when you talk about, the full life cycle of the animal is quite a new application of that production system. And you have people that I had the pleasure of working with that are putting these facilities in places in the world that you do not associate with salmon at all. I mean, you'll find it on the shelf of the store, but it's not produced there. It's usually flown in or moved in by boat. And I've also had the pleasure of working with startups previous to this as a management consultant, and before I also joined Aquaticode, I used to be an early stage investor, which is something that I did for some years because I've always had an admiration for entrepreneurship, and I think innovation has been one constant throughout my career.
Right, no, great, absolutely. So really combining aquaculture with entrepreneur early stage was the perfect setting, and we don't come across that many early stage entrepreneurial companies in this particular space, because I suppose aquaculture is quite a mature, consolidated industry, isn't it? But tell us about like the journey to starting Aquaticode.
Yeah, Aquaticode was started by a venture builder called Nager Capital, and they specialize in the intersection between computer vision and biology. And they have a lot of domain knowledge in the area. They have a portfolio of companies who works in this intersection. So you have fertility, which does IVF and predicts the likelihood of live birth, basically. Then you have FDNA, which analyzes and predicts the quality of seeds. SeedX, that's SeedX, that's not FDNA. And then you have FDNA, which identifies rare diseases in children. And then you have us, which is Aquaticode, which builds artificial intelligence for aquaculture. So they have a philosophy where they use their domain knowledge, and they go into an industry where it's there's a big opportunity. It's an industry in growth, and the technological maturity is at the correct level. They then use their domain knowledge to start a company and very quickly hire the advisory board of titans from the industry, as well as management with a suitable background. So in this case, aquaculture, I was one of the hires.
Got it. Absolutely. So when was the company founded, essentially?
2018.
2018. Okay. So you joined like just over a year ago, and you're the current CEO of the business.
Yes. Correct.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about. I'd love to hear a little bit about. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, I suppose, the real challenges in aquaculture, and what your company, what it really kind of, the challenges it really solves.
Yeah. So we use machine learning to solve some of the industry's most significant challenges. And in general terms, for me, that means being able to produce more with less. So for us, it's about removing bottlenecks, which for shrimp, for example, is disease epidemics. So diseases is a big prohibitor in the growth of the shrimp sector. And for salmon, it's about biological performance. And if we then zoom in on salmon, it's a very regulated industry, and the bottleneck is basically the number of salmon that you can have in a net pen, that you can have in the sea in the cage in any given time. And to give you an example, we have placed our second product, which is the Sort Pro, at a customer facility now, right? And even though we are an AI company, we've built a muscle that's capable of doing the brain spitting. And so in addition to doing classifications based on machine visions, the Sort Pro also actions on insights through automation. The first release of the machine can sort 10,000 juvenile salmon, so salmon smolt according to gender. And the reason that this is important is because the males grow faster than the females. So if you separate them, you can shorten the production cycle, which then translates to a higher turnover in the pens, meaning that you're able to produce more with less. And this is something that's it's done manually today. So in Chile, they gender sort salmon with a team of 10 to 25 people using ultrasounds and including the people around the people using ultrasounds. But it's not done in any of the other salmon producing countries, because the labor cost in Chile, of course, is much lower than in Norway or in Canada or in the UK, etc. So
it's a completely manual process, essentially. Normally,
yes. Yes, currently. So it's done with 10% of the global salmon population. Around 100 million fish per year is gender sorted in Chile by a dedicated team of experts.
Incredible. Absolutely. Okay. So how many kind of salmon are in the actual kind of, what do you call it? Is it the net or the the compound? Because they always look so huge, but I'm wondering, you mentioned about the regulations. So how many are in there?
Yeah, so we focus specifically on the early stages. So the salmon is actually still on land in facilities, so in basically giant warehouses with tanks and pumps and water filtration systems, etc. And these facilities, they can be anywhere from a couple of million to 30 million, and probably even beyond that in terms of population. So there's a lot of salmon within one facility. So you can imagine if you do this manually in a facility that has 15 million salmon produced every year, then it's a big process to actually go through ultrasounding every individual salmon in order to divide them into different tanks for different genders.
Yeah, understand. And what is the purpose though? Is it purely a breeding program, as it were? Is this where they breed, and you know, what are the other purposes? You know,
Yeah, that's a good question. It's so this is for production. This is for the production program, but they actually do it in the breeding program as well. And there they do it at least in part in the other countries, because you don't have that many fish in the breeding program like you have in production, right? So the number of salmon in production is much higher than the number of fish in breeding.
yeah, I can imagine actually, and so essentially, when you talk about the biological you know, context, what is it that you're, so you can sift through and make these choices, and do you get a higher quality of salmon at the end of the production process? You know, what results does your kind of AI technology help you achieve?
So the number one, I think, aspect of gender sorting is the fact that the males grow faster, so you can harvest basically the male population at a more advantageous time than the female population. But there's other aspects as well. You have for example, sexual maturation in salmon, which is more prevalent if the population is mixed. And it is something that really makes an impact on both the survival of the fish throughout the life cycle, but also the end product. So basically, sexually matured salmon aren't usually suitable for human consumption. There's other aspects. I think you could also what's done today frequently is that they size grade salmon, because you want the population to be as homogeneous as possible. It has many implications. One of them is, for example, feeding, right? So if you have a population where they're more similar, then you can optimize feeding, which is the biggest cost actually in salmon production. And I think also to your question, what's the application? So I also think about this machine, the Sort Pro, as a platform, right? We collect a lot of data. We have ultrasounds, and then we have RGB cameras on it. And we're launching with gender sorting, but we get a lot of information that we're doing research on, and we have active research projects on, that allows us to look at other types of performance traits or animal welfare traits or disease resistance in general. So one example is, as I mentioned, maturation is a problem. So we can identify early matured fish with the system that we have, and it's a feature that we will launch actually very soon.
That sounds great. And you mentioned there about some of the disease stuff, and I think maybe it's more, you know, with shrimp, as it were. So just to clarify, product wise, is it shrimp and salmon are the two main products that your technology kind of works with?
Yeah, so salmon is the first species that we're actually launching a product in, but we've been working with shrimp also for a while, and I would expect that we're launching a product within shrimp this year as well.
Got it. Okay. And because a lot of the shrimp is based in, well, it's not in Norway, is it? It's mainly Asia, right? And Southeast Asia. Is that right for the shrimp market?
Yeah, so it's Asia and Ecuador basically. So very different markets. I mean, also from market structure perspective. So the salmon industry is heavily consolidated. There are some very big players in the shrimp industry as well, but then you also have a long tail of very small producers.
Yeah.
So it's different both in terms of I think structure and geography, but it's both of them. So salmon and shrimp are two major aquaculture species.
Yeah. And because I have heard quite a lot about the shrimp disease, you know, for instance. So tell us a little bit about that and how this solution can kind of help with that.
So you have, I mean, there's different diseases, but some diseases are capable of wiping out entire populations of shrimp. And so then it's about if you have infected individuals in a pond, then you can count on the whole pond being infected and the impact being quite big. So it's about managing that once you have an outbreak. It's about containing it, and it's about also identifying the outbreak early so that you can make better decisions based on it, right? Also, in terms of, if do you try to prolong or do you harvest? And so for us, looking at it the way that it's done today, it's sometimes it's through visual inspection, but then the disease is quite far advanced, or it can be through PCRs or lab analysis. But then that's expensive, and you don't necessarily sample as frequently as you maybe would if you had a quicker and a cheaper alternative to that. And so that's maybe a hint of the direction that we're going in.
Yeah. And I would imagine that takes time as well, right?
To develop.
No, with the PCR tests and the results back, and there must be a lag there. If you're coming up with information and knowledge kind of real time on things, I would have thought decisions, critical decision making will be better.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It is time consuming, and you're burning valuable time waiting for the results.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that sounds super exciting. So just tell us a little bit more about the technology and the stack that kind of helps support the business.
Yeah, so we are an AI first company. Machine learning is the core competency that we have, and one of the core, let's say, competencies we have within that is being able to work with small data sets, which is important when you're working with the life sciences. You cannot necessarily just buy off the shelf, hundreds of thousands of images or videos of whatever you're trying to look at. You actually have to go into the field, and you have to collect the data, and you have to get your hands dirty and do the groundwork. And it's very time consuming, and it's resource consuming. So for us, being able to work on these smaller data sets, I think, is part of why we've been able to cover a lot of R&D ground with the small organization. Although, of course, we're increasing in size, we have been doing multiple research efforts now over time.
Yeah. Okay. No, great. And so tell us a little bit about the, when you think about the mission and the vision for the company, please, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So feeding the future is probably the greatest challenge of our time. I mean, we're not able to live within the planetary bounds today. We're destroying the ecosystem at an unprecedented scale. We're overfishing the oceans. We really have a hard time coexisting on this planet with other species. And then, consider the fact that we'll be 9.7 billion people by 2050. We do have to change not only the way that we consume, but also the way that we produce. And for me, then, aquaculture is and also will be a big part of the solution. If you look at the aquatic species, the nutritional density of a fish or shrimp is very, very high. The edible part of it is quite high as well. When it comes to production, it's a low carbon footprint compared to the alternatives. It doesn't require a lot of land. It doesn't require a lot of water. It doesn't require a lot of energy necessarily. So it is a very good alternative, and a very good also a very good member of the protein mix now and in the future. And so we basically create technology that accelerate aquaculture's contribution to saving the planet. Yeah,
absolutely. And just looking at that issue, what are the biggest challenges, with that? Is it more overfishing, or is it more the climate? Is it more the state of the oceans? Where would you put them in terms of challenges?
I think it's all of the above. Our presence is really altering the natural world, and you do see species going extinct at unprecedented rates. You see entire ecosystems collapsing because we are taking too much from them, or we are impacting the way that they work based on our behavior and the results from our behavior. So I think it's a very complex and big picture, and I don't think there's a silver bullet capable of solving it. I think it needs to be addressed from multiple aspects, and I think when it comes to food production specifically, I wouldn't propose that we stop fishing overnight, for example. I think fishing, but well managed, is an important part of the dinner plates of the future. I think also land animal protein will be important. I think new protein alternatives will be important, but I think aquaculture is a high impact part to the equation of moving towards a more sustainable world.
Yeah, and for someone that spent many years in aquaculture, when you look at the industry, and you mentioned some interesting technology at Skretting, do they lead from a sustainability viewpoint, do you think?
Yeah, you can. I mean, there's a yearly that there's research on what's the most sustainable companies in different sectors, and consistently you will see the big salmon producers and also some of the smaller ones doing very well on those lists. I do think today, I mean, the industry obviously has its challenges, but I do think today it is a very sustainable alternative.
Yeah, absolutely. So really, your company has been set up very much with a kind of mission, very much led by making an impact, and as you said, being able to kind of do more with less, as it were. It sounds like really the nature of the business to be really efficient and effective around that production process, and using the innovation and the technology to make better choices, as it were. How do you find, in terms of the customers that you speak with? Tell us a little bit about when you think about that value chain, because it can be quite a complex value chain, as it were. Where are your customers, and I suppose how has the adoption of this kind of technology been taken up by customers?
So we typically talk directly to the farmers, because they are the ones producing the fish, and what we do is related to the fish itself. I think the reception has been quite good. We're actually in a stage as a company now where we are shifting gears from creating our first major product, which is the Sort Pro, to scaling up manufacturing of machines, Sort Pro machines, to fulfill the contracts that we have. I think we see a lot of curiosity in terms of the product, but also in terms of artificial intelligence in general. We have had the privilege of having done 15 different R&D partnerships with industrial players, right, across the value chain of multiple species in aquaculture. And I think part of the reason why we've been able to do it is because we are part of an industry that does, that are curious about technology and the applications of technology, and that are looking maybe also in part at agriculture and seeing how the major technological trends are shaping agriculture. So I think the reception has been good, and the curiosity is definitely there.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great. Absolutely. And what are the challenges? So if I'm a customer, how does it work? Do I buy your product, and is it tell me a little bit about the product. How big is the box, and if I'm buying it, what am I buying?
So from a production perspective, the way that it's done in Chile today, and the way that we've created this machine, is you do it on the back end of vaccination, because the the fish are vaccinated at a very early stage, typically between 20 and 100 grams. And when it comes to, you're dealing with a live animal, so you wanna handle the live animal as little as possible. So you don't want to necessarily transfer it more than is necessary. You don't want to, you want to leave it in peace as much as you can. So for us, it was very important to tie into an existing process. And then the fish is already out of the water, it's already sedated, and it's going back into a tank. So from an operational perspective, I think in Chile particularly, the facilities are built around this. In Norway and in other markets, I think it can easily be done as well. And the footprint of the machine is it's around 2 times 3 meters or something, 2.5 times 3 meters. So it's I mean it's a machine, but it's not huge compared to the space within these facilities.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And what is it like scaling up and producing these machines? Is that what are the complexities with that part of the process?
Yeah, there are several. I mean, as I said earlier, we're an AI first company, so we don't have our own workshop. We're not bending metal or fastening screws or whatever. So for us, number one, it's very important that this is our machine. So we have competency in-house, automation engineers, that has been very much a part of the design. We own the drawings and everything related to the machine. So theoretically, we can produce it we can produce machines in Chile, we can produce machines in Europe. We don't have to set up shop. So I think that part is easy, but then again, we're shifting gears from developing a product to actually scaling up the production of a product. So there's a cost component to that, of course, and there's when we have a fleet of machines in the field, we need to make sure that we have the service component of that ready. There's a whole number of considerations, which is interesting to have to deal with as a growing company.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I see that. And what are your kind of, I suppose, dreams and hopes for the company if you look over the next 10 years? What kind of impact do you think you can have?
So if I look over the next 10 years, I think we will have been part of the transition towards, let's say, aquaculture 2.0. There's 5 mega trends within aquaculture that's expected to have a big impact. So number one is selective breeding, where you can improve biological performance and animal welfare. You have novel ingredients which can improve raw material sustainability and flexibility. You have precision farming, which can optimize production conditions. You have recirculation systems, RAS, which I talked about earlier, being able to produce almost anywhere. And then you have AI, which is, of course, what we represent, which can drive advances in farm management, in animal welfare, in biological performance. And I talked about this a bit from a product level, but generically, it can help detect, identify, and predict performance traits. I think it can lead to better and faster and more consistent and more transparent decisions and actions. And the combination of AI and automation is, after all, expected to spark the fourth industrial revolution. Which is something that I think will have an impact on aquaculture as well. So for us specifically, I think also we're a multi-species company. We're present in different parts of the value chains, and we have an understanding of the individual animal, both in terms of snapshots in the early stages, but also in terms of predicting and perhaps also monitoring how they develop in the later stages as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems really exciting, as it were. And when you consider kind of growth, you're on the earlier stages of the transition. So how many people do you currently work in the company?
So we have right around 15 people now, and everyone is, core function. It's either technology or biology or engineering, or it's related to the product. And then I mentioned we're backed by a venture builder called Naker Capital. So we actually lend finance functions, legal functions, and recruitment from them. So we have access to very competent support functions, which we don't necessarily need one person 100% of the time. Maybe we need 20%, 25% of a finance manager, which we have access to through that then.
Yeah, absolutely. It's more like fractional kind of job roles for those support functions.
Yeah.
It's yeah, like it's much more efficient at the early stage of growth. I suppose when you've been hiring and bringing people in, are you finding people are wanting to join you because of the story and the mission? Is it like that resonance of culture is the main reason why they're interested in joining?
That's a good question. I mean, I do think a lot of people are becoming aware of the benefits of aquaculture. You know, aquaculture obviously has its challenges, and they tend to get some very strong headlines. But the benefits are quite clear. I think people are buying into a higher purpose of doing something that actually, you know, is part of solving a significant challenge, which is something that you do, in my opinion, when you work within aquaculture. So I think that's a component. We also have a policy of hiring, you know, the best candidate independent of geography, which I think for us has worked out well. So we've been able to hire from the major technological hubs, Tel Aviv and Sao Paulo and Silicon Valley, and it's given us access to great talent. We also do something which I think works very well, as we have the first person to do the interview is typically our chairman. Right, so we typically put the most senior person doing the first interview because he has a great intuition, right? So he in terms of understanding this person's cultural fit and understanding how this person, you know, will work within the company, and then we do more technical interviews later. And I think it's, yeah.
I don't know too many chairmen. I don't know too many chairmen that do that.
No, and it's not necessarily a 2-hour interview. It can be a 15-30 minutes interview just to sort of feel the lay of the land. But of course, we do a lot of pre-selection before the interview stage as well. So it's not 100 interviews per position. But I really do think that's a good thing that we do.
Yeah.
And you know, we're an early stage company. We have a lean organization, so we cannot actually afford to make bad hiring decisions. So we do need, you know, for lack of a better phrase, we do need to have a championship team consisting of people who's both curious and courageous and capable and caring. So hiring for us is a fundamental part of building this company.
I like that. It's like the 3 C's: curious, capable, and caring.
See, I just worked in our values there in my my narrative.
Yeah. No, but I like it. And I was going to ask what is brilliant. I mean, clearly you've taken advantage of global technology hubs, because I would imagine recruiting and trying to hire people to come on site and join your company based where you are is going to be really restrictive from that viewpoint. So it sounds like you've really been able to kind of embrace, and you know, it's interesting. It's probably post-COVID that's, you know, enabled you to really do that. I'm wondering if we're having this conversation back in 18 or 19, that's part of the overall strategy, as it were, or whether it's being kind of guided by certain events. But yeah, what do you think about that?
I think you're right. I mean, so back in 2018, this would have been a very, very lean organization. So we only did significant hiring on the back end of COVID. So I do think it's a little bit of a product of that. People see that you can actually work remotely. I mean, it has its disbenefits, certainly, but it also has some very strong benefits. And the fact that you know, we now have a better understanding of how to collaborate and how to manage people remotely, I think is an important aspect of it as well. And then I think a lot of people has a genuine preference of working remotely, right? Being able to live, or actually also to travel, right? And then have a job that's you know, would be difficult to get otherwise in the place you are. And for us, I mean, Norway has, of course, some very good AI competency, but it's not a major technological hub. Like we don't have, there's not there's not a enormous talent pool here, and people maybe tend to go towards the larger companies. So for us, it's brilliant to be able to actually recruit from anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I can imagine around that competence. But you mentioned some other skill sets as well. What I've always find fascinating about some of the disruptive companies that I deal with is it's almost like the multidiscipline. You know, it's just like you require so many different skill sets and disciplines with it all coming together. So apart from AI, are there any, you know, what are the other kind of main kind of skill sets or disciplines that you generally look for when you're building culture, building team?
Yeah, maybe you have to be a certain kind of person to want to be in an early stage company, because you are in a company, if you're lucky, then you are in a company that is changing quite rapidly, and will not just undergo one change, right, but will undergo several changes. So we do need people that's capable and also willing to grow with the company, that's, you know, has the skill set to work within an undefined frame set with a huge component of problem solving and you know, fairly well defined jobs, but then being expected to maybe work not as specialized as you would in a bigger company. So there's a sense of adaptability, and also for us, we ref the fact that we're a small organization. We're also reliant on hiring people that we think will grow with the company, because as companies grow bigger, typically there's more management layers, for example, and ideally you want to look for candidates that's capable of doing their current job well, but also capable of doing, you know, the job of tomorrow well, which may mean that they'll be in a different part of the organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people need to be proactive as well, right? Because it is, we're not, I mean, nobody can sit back and relax and think that this big organization will keep the wheels going even if I don't do what I'm supposed to do. We do need people who actually pull their weight, and I think the bright side of that is that people actually, so the people we have employed makes a difference. They make a tremendous difference. For me, it would be tough to lose even a single one of our employees, both, you know, of course personally, but also from a company perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I can see that. And, you know, I think you put your finger on it earlier, you know, when you're so early on that trajectory, it's different challenges, isn't it? But you need to get everything right from that hiring viewpoint. That's the first thing. But then I would imagine as you grow and develop, you do start building in more layers, and you do put more structure and process in place. So, you know, you kind of evolve and grow, and it requires a slightly different skill set. So, yeah, I mean, how much do you think about that, and how much do you kind of zoom out and start thinking about the changing nature of the company, as it were?
Yeah, it's an ever-evolving company. I think that you know, that's true for many companies, but especially startups. So we do have structural pieces that falls into place on a weekly basis, because we grow bigger, or we become more advanced or more, you know, and then we identify that we need to have structure around it, or we encounter a new problem, right? Because that also happens. We encounter something we haven't encountered before, but then we recognize that, okay, this could have been avoided, or you know, we could have grabbed this opportunity faster, or whatever, if we had some sort of structure around it.
Yeah.
So it is an evolution, I would say, and it's a lot of incremental steps. You know, everything from getting a proper vacation policy, which isn't the first thing that you think about when you have an idea for a product, to making sure that we have we have a good communication architecture, especially since we're remote.
Yeah,
there's a lot of bits and pieces, nuts and bolts.
Absolutely. So what do you think the most challenging thing for you is, like, I suppose just over a year into the journey as CEO, what's been the, the most challenging part of the journey that you found being a first-time CEO, right?
Yeah, I'm a first-time CEO. So I don't know if it's challenging, but it is. I have the benefit of working with a very competent organization, so the management team that I work with, I have a tremendous respect for, and they are very capable within their domain. And so the transition from me, having gone from management positions before, but then typically within the function, and then sometimes project or program management, which tends to be a bit more cross-functional, to actually looking at it from an enterprise perspective, and looking at it from a perspective of the competent people I work with owning their own function within the organization. That was a transition for me. That's something that I had to be mindful of, that I'm not being too much into the details, or also equally being too far away from
far
the
away,
details, right?
yeah. Yes, it's a real challenging balance, isn't it? Yeah. Because I would have thought the natural tendency when you first do it is just you want to make sure everything is right. So the natural tendency is probably to be a little bit too focused on certain things, and almost the challenge of removing yourself a little bit too far. So it's absolutely.
Yeah, it's an important balance, I think, and I think it's important to be mindful of when you do a transition such as the one that I did. It is a different kind of job, and it's there's good learning in that transition.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, it's been fantastic having you on. I just wanted to thank you for your time. And it sounds like such an exciting time for you guys over the next few years. And there's some real kind of challenges out there. And I just wanted to wish you all the best, because the company sounds great, the product sounds super, and just wanted to wish you all the very best for the future.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and thanks so much for the conversation.